Next thing I want us to understand is that God's call comes with a purpose. There was a specific reason why he came to Moses and why he revealed himself to Moses, and it wasn't just for passing the time of day. He came with a purpose. There was a reason for revealing himself to Moses in the wilderness, and Moses was chosen long before this encounter. He was prepared long before this encounter. He was trained in different ways long before this encounter. And he was the deliverer of Israel under God's hand, and God was preparing him for the job, and now he was practically ready for it. There's a reason why God revealed himself to us. You know, without his revelation, the journey to become his children would never happen, would never take place. And God has everything in the journey that we're taking under his control if we allow him to. God had everything in hand for Moses, and God has everything in hand for you and for me. Now it was time for him to show his hand, and for him to begin the process that he had trained and chosen Moses for. This was Moses' time. This was God's time. This was Israel's time in his purpose. This is our time. Whatever situation you're in right now, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, this is your time. This is your time to allow God to direct you and to lead you and to take you into the impossible. You know, in Esther chapter 4 verse 14, we read those wonderful words from Mordecai, the cousin of Esther. Yet who knows whether you've been chosen for such a time as this? She was chosen for a specific purpose, and I haven't got time to go into that. That part of the impossible journey is far removed from this part of the impossible journey for Israel. A totally different time scale, a totally different situation. But you know, God has his purpose in every situation, in every time scale, and in every generation. God has his purpose for you right now, and God has his purpose for me. Who knows that you've been called for such a time as this? Listen to his call into your heart and life, and understand that he's willing to take you into his purposes and into his plan. And after his introduction, you know, of who he is, I am God, I am. Who are you? Who can I say the people have sent me to? Just tell him I am has sent you. No need to tell him anything else. I am. You know, God gets onto the reason for his revelation. It wasn't just for the sake of it. Verse 7. First thing he says is, I have surely seen. I've seen what the Israelites are going through. I've seen what the children are suffering from, what their everyday circumstance and situation is, how they're being humiliated and abused. He sees you right now in whatever situation you are. As you sit listening to this, if you are listening to this, God sees you. He understands what your situation is. He sees everything that you're going through and every problem that you face. He sees the challenges that you're facing and that you're undertaking. He also says in verse 7, I've heard their cry. So he's seen them and he has heard them. I've heard their cry. You know, even before you utter them, God knows our thoughts and our hearts. He understands our very thinking. Even before we say a word to him, he already knows what's going to come out of our mouths. If it comes out of our mouths, it may stay deep within us, but he actually knows what we're saying and what we're thinking and what we're knowing. So he sees, he knows, or he hears, sorry. He hears, and that's the third thing I wanted to mention. He knows. He knew their sorrows. He sees, he hears, he knows. I want you to think about that for the moment. God sees you, he hears you, he knows everything about you, he knows everything about your situation right now and your circumstances. He knows everything there is to know. And there's nothing that God doesn't know about us. We can't hide things from him. We might be able to hide them from other people, and everyone else for that matter. There are things deep within our hearts that other people don't know anything about, but God knows about them. He knows the deepest sorrows in your heart. He knows the deepest joys in your very being. He knows everything there is to know about you. So what's the result of him seeing, hearing and knowing? I have come down to deliver them, in verse 8. I love it when God intervenes in situations. He doesn't just look and hear and know. He does something about it. And if you let him and allow him to, on your journey, he will step in. He will undertake for you. He will bring you through. He will take you to where you need to go and to where you need to be. And the process which he will take you will have a purpose in its very self. And you may be thinking right now, well, look, things around me aren't that great. It's impossible for me to get out of this situation, or it's impossible for this to happen in my life. It's impossible for me to achieve that, or it's impossible for me to get over that. It's impossible for me to deal with that. It's not. If you do it with God and in his way, nothing is impossible. That's what this series is about, the impossible journey. What is impossible in human nature is never impossible with God. Nothing is impossible with him. You see, God is not impassive about the way you feel. He understands how you feel. And he understands why you feel the way you feel about it. And he's able to do something about it as well if we put our trust in him and allow him to. And he says, I've come down to deliver them and bring them up. Now, didn't we see back a little while ago that God promised that he will, as he takes the children of Israel down into Egypt, he will also come back and bring them out again. And now he has put that into operation, into action, through the call of Moses. This impossible journey now is moving a step forward, and he's bringing them up. Remember the promise to Jacob, I will surely bring you out. That was a long, long time ago, but God hadn't forgotten it. God doesn't forget his promises, and God doesn't forget what he's going to do in our hearts and our lives, and what he has told us he's willing to do if we'll just look to him and obey him. And it's in his timing, which is perfect, as we've already seen in this series. So God now is stepping into the situation, and I think it's incredible that his promises to bring them to a land that he has already prepared for them. This is no ordinary land that he's preparing for his children. To a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a land that is superior to what anything they've ever known, the land that he promised to Abraham all those years ago. He's now setting his sights on bringing his children into the fulfillment of that promise. And he says, their cry in verse 9 has come to me. Their cry has come to me, and I have seen. Again, the hearing of the cry, the seeing of the situation. And he says to him in verse 10, I will send you. Have you ever asked God, where do you want me to go? Have you ever asked him, Lord, where are you sending me? What do you want me to do for you? What do you have in store for me? Where do you want to take me? God is a sending God. He wants you to touch somebody else's life on your journey. In the process that you go through, he wants to take you forward. Who is he sending you to? Have you asked him? You know, he says in verse 10, I will send you. God, the sending God. There's someone waiting for God to send you to them. They're looking for the answer to that impossibility, and God wants you to go and be the person that he wants to send. Are we willing to respond to help them on their impossible journey the way that God has helped us on our impossible journey?